Welcome to Cooking with Bubbles. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Rodney. Let's get started.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 turns.
Pages off.
Ooh.
Nice. I love this. We open a lot of bubbles every year, don't we?
Yes, we do. All right. Get some cranberry.
Put a little bit of cayenne in there. Just for some color.
Pretty color.
And clink.
Here's clink. Oh my god.
Okay.
Wow.
I needed that. It was awesome.
Here we are, Lisa, back to what we love doing, and that's cooking while drinking Prosecco. And we invite our guests to feel free to pour your own glass of bubbles, whatever that is for you, and enjoy the show. We also want to point out we're wearing our fancy new embroidered Cooking with Bubbles aprons, and we'll tell you later in the show how you can get yours.
Sounds good. So Rodney, what are we going to make today?
We are going to make pizza dough.
Okay, good. Well, I have a recipe for that. That sounds good.
Good.
So let's drink bubbles to that. Oh, yummy. So yeah, a couple of years ago, we bought a pizza oven attachment for our flat camping grill. And that really inspired me to want to learn how to make pizza dough on my own instead of having to always buy it. Awesome. So this recipe is a little bit like a science project. So I'm hoping to make it easy so that anyone that wants to make their own pizza dough can do it and feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah, awesome.
This recipe calls for 3/4 cup of warm water and like a package of the active dry yeast, or basically it's 2 1/4 teaspoons. And it calls for 3 to 3.5 cups of flour and 1/4 cup of olive oil and 1/2 teaspoon of salt.
Oh, that sounds so good. I'll drink bubbles to that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll help step you through the process. And one of the main things we have to do is make sure that the water we're using is at the right temperature to activate the yeast. And that temperature is about 110 to 115. So we're going to let it rest just for a second.
Well, true to Lisa's statement that this is a science project, I had to put my water in my bowl so that it didn't get too cool before putting in the yeast. The yeast has a very small window of temperature of about 110 degrees Fahrenheit to 115. And I knew once I put it in the bowl, it was going to cool down. So I had to get mine in the bowl quickly. Lisa's is still cooling down.
Right, I'm at 120.
Okay, you're almost there. Okay, we just don't want to put it in too hot because that'll kill the yeast. Too cold won't activate it. So we're getting to the same step in the process right now. And then once we get there, we'll come back and we'll walk you through the next steps. We just put the yeast in the water to dissolve it and let it activate, and then we'll continue, and we'll be back in just a moment for that.
Okay. Okay, so we have our stand mixer ready to go. We put our yeast in there. Mine finally cooled down to 115 degrees, and I was able to add my yeast to it. And now the next step, after we let it sit for about 4 to 5 minutes to kind of activate a little bit, the next step will be to add our flour. And we're going to be putting in 3 cups of flour. This is just regular, all-purpose flour. You can use other kinds of flour as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But we're going to add 3 cups to our mixture. And I'm going to put my dough hook in. We're also going to put in our teaspoon of salt. I'm just going to go ahead and toss that in.
Half teaspoon.
Half a teaspoon. Thank you very much. That's how you make boo-boos, is by adding too much of anything.
Yep, especially salt.
Exactly. And now we're going to also add to this a 1/4 cup of olive oil. This recipe is considered a Sicilian style pizza dough because of the olive oil. There's other versions too. But all we're going to do is go ahead and get this started. And we're going to mix this until the dough forms a ball. We've got our dough hook in, that'll help.
Yeah. So we're going to mix this and then we'll come back.
Yeah. So basically, what had happened was we were starting to work our dough with the mixer, and it was kind of not really coming together as a big ball like we'd wanted. So now what we're doing is we're kind of hand knead it a little bit. And the idea with kneading it is to help the elasticity of it improve. So we took it out of our mixer, and that's what we're doing right now, is we're just going to knead it for a minute or two on a lightly floured surface.
Well, and we both had to add more olive oil, right? Because it was very dry.
Yes.
I added just a smidge more water, but we both added maybe another tablespoon in total of olive oil.
Yes.
Now it's starting to come together nicely now that we pulled it out and been kneading it on the counter. At least mine is.
Yes, mine too. So I will say that in my household, the dough pro is my husband. So I'm working it,
Yeah.
making it happen.
So earlier we talked about the importance of water temperature for yeast, and just the tip, a very wise investment for every kitchen is a quality food thermometer. You can use it for a number of different types of cooking, from baking to grilling to doing what we're doing, which is working with yeast.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? That's a really good tip, Rodney. And in order to test the dough, you can squeeze a portion of it over your hand. And if it's too sticky, you can add more flour. In our case, because it was a little on the drier side, you can add a little bit of water, or we added a little bit of olive oil to ours.
Yeah. And you want to add it slowly so that you don't go too far in the other direction.
Yeah.
And another, just the tip, we're using just regular flour, but
yeah, right.
Flour, high gluten, semolina flours, and if you use those, they can require up to 4 additional tablespoons of water, and they also require a second rising.
That's correct. I'm just going to put a little bit of water here next to me.
And I'll drink bubbles.
Well, I'm going to drink bubbles to that. This is hard work.
Yes.
And when you talked about a second rising, well, that's what he said.
Well, now that everything's mixed together, Lisa, what's next? Does it need to rise?
Yeah. That's what he said. So now we're going to take this kneaded ball, and you know what? It looks good.
It does look pretty.
I'm happy enough with it. Yep. Created a little ball. It's still going to be delicious pizza dough. I don't care what.
No doubt.
But the next step is we're going to take, in my case, I'm using a stainless steel bowl. I've sprayed it lightly with some nonstick spray. And the goal is to let this thing rise. So we're just going to drop it in, and then we're going to cover it with plastic. And so when that rises after about 30, 45 minutes, we'll come back and show you what that looks like.
Yeah, and if your oven has a proof setting, you can use that to rise your dough. If it doesn't, and mine doesn't, I know yours does, Lisa, but mine doesn't. If you have a gas oven, your pilot light should be good enough to keep it nice and warm in the oven.
Right.
And if you have an electric stove, then you want to turn your heat on to 200 for about 10 minutes and then shut it off before you put your dough into rise. And that way it won't start cooking, but it'll give the yeast some nice heat to start doing its thing. So we're going to put this in and let it rise. And then once it's doubled in bulk, we'll come back and continue on from here.
Okay. Okay, so we've had this proofing. Mine took almost a full 40 minutes to proof up to be double its size, but I can now take the plastic wrap off. And the next step for this, get this wrap off. Oh yeah, look at that, it looks good. is we're gonna use our fist and we're just gonna punch it down and all the gases are gonna quickly escape.
That's what he said.
All right, so now we're ready to remove the dough from that container. I'm gonna just lightly flour my surface here. And we're gonna knead it for 1 more minute. Oh yeah, this consistency is really good. It's nice and soft.
Yep, very nice.
Yeah, it's good.
One nice thing about
Yeah,
this is you can make batches of dough and you can freeze them, and then you can just have pizza any time of the week that you want to.
yeah. I'll drink bubbles to that, man. I love that idea.
Okay, so I am the king of weighing food. So I'm going to put mine on the food scale and see how big it is. That's also what he said. And
That's what he's.
I am going to cut it into halves first. So mine is 625 grams. At my
I'm
little
gonna switch to grams.
that I got recently. I know you recommended I get one, and I finally did. And I'm going to cut it in half and see how I did from a weight perspective. Pretty close. 334, 292. I'm going to cut a little bit more off of this. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to use half of this for a recipe that I'm making today, and the other half I'm going to cut in half again, and I'm going to freeze it, and then I'll have it for pizza.
That's a great idea. This is also the point in the dough making process that if you had used one of those other types of dough, like a high gluten or a bread flour, that you would give it a second rising. And that's just a little tip. And what that means basically is you're going to repeat what you've already done, let it come back up, punch it back down again. So this is a good tip here.
Awesome. So look at this. This is really nice. Looks really good. Even though we're not going to cook anything with it today, this dough just looks so amazing. I'm going to take some pictures. What a great, easy recipe to make.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we'd like to thank our virtual audience for joining today. And we'd like to thank all of you so much for watching Cooking with Bubbles. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is at cookingwithbubbles.com. And make sure you click the little bell symbol next to subscribe so that you'll get notified of future episodes, because you never know when we're going to make a recipe using this pizza dough.
That's right.
You get notified of that. Also, please remember to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/cookingwithbubbles. Facebook is where we post all of our recipes, pictures that we take along the way, and that's where you can go and find all those things. So make sure you like us.
That sounds really good. We mentioned earlier too that we'll tell you how to get your own Cooking with Bubbles apron. You just have to send us an email and we'll tell you all the details regarding that. They come in red, blue, black, and white. So get yours so you can be with us when it's time to cook with Bubbles. Also, if you have made any of the recipes that we featured here on Cooking with Bubbles, why don't you send us your pictures? We'd love to see how your recipe turned out as well. If you have suggestions on things that we should make on Cooking with Bubbles, you can also send us to us by email. Our email address is cookingwithbubbles@yahoo.com. Well, that takes care of it for today. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Rodney. See you next time.